Okay, so I've been reading Warbreaker. I'm just about to start chapter 35, which is page 409 of this version right here. And I hear you ask me, you say, Connor, what has happened in the last 100 pages or so? And I respond and I say, everything has happened, and also nothing. So loads of things happened, but a lot was implied in this section. And there's so much kind of world building and history and subtle hints thrown into this section that I'm really excited for this video. First thing is, we have a lot of conversations about God Kings, how the succession works, where one goes or how one even dies, how the heir would get the breaths, especially with a tongue cut out. And we're 90% certain, or our characters are 90% certain, that the God Kings are forced somehow to give their breaths to their heir. And they're pretty certain of this because every time an heir is born, it's very shortly afterwards, I think like 1 year maximum, before the God King dies, and then the next one, the son or the heir, like returns and becomes the next God King, which is very suspicious. So we don't know how they're forced to hand over their breaths, because as far as I know, you have to say my breath to yours, and they don't have a tongue. So there must be a way that that's being forced. Number two, we know kind of why, because they want to maintain those breaths and hang on to them as a kingdom, I suppose. But that doesn't answer the real question as to why is it so important to pass those breaths down. Could it be just so that they have a puppet ruler that has the legitimacy of having this amount of breaths, so we can call them a God King or maybe even a God Queen at some point? That would be good to have a puppet leader, like if you are the priest and you're just trying to run a country. But we know Brandon Sanderson, and we know that he is much more complex and poetic than that. So my guess is that they are continuing to pass these breaths along until they get the correct God King. And I would guess the correct God King has to have the old lineage inside of him, Ciri and Vivenna's lineage. Why? Not 100% certain. It would seem that there are a lot of secrets still to find out. But as I guessed all the way back in the first video, I think the hair growing and changing color and the fact that they are the royal bloodline, like that obviously has to tie into it. So I have some predictions on this that I'm going to come back to because I think they're really good. Actually, no, I'm just going to go into this prediction right now because it's a really fun one and I feel relatively confident about it. Even it's not super specific. Let me just tell you the prediction. So it's alluded to that the God King can give away the breaths that he's now getting from the like sacrificial breaths that people are handing over to him. So he's getting sometimes even up to 3 or 4 of those per week, and that's how he has such a big stack and how he's achieved such a heightening. I think that his final act, and I don't know how because he doesn't have a tongue, but I'm pretty certain it was said like right at the start that though the best people can do it, like the words aren't the important thing, because we've started to learn a little bit about awakening from Vivenna's experience, and really it's about like what you think in your mind. Obviously the words must be relatively important as well, but surely what you're thinking in your mind is more important than just the sounds that are made. So I think the God King will maybe pass on all his breaths to either Ciri or Vivenna, and that will make them the God Queen because they have the breaths which make them legitimate, and they are legitimate because they're from the old bloodline, so they can grow their hair and change color. And initially I thought it was going to be Ciri, but I'm actually leaning towards it being Vivenna now, because Vivenna was the one who was primed. The only reason it wouldn't be, and it would be Ciri, is because the God King has a good relationship with Ciri, so he wouldn't want her to die. But I just feel like Vivenna is the one that's actually being primed to be like a ruler, although she is filling up with hatred quite a lot as well. So it's an interesting one. And then also, maybe, I don't know how returns are made, but maybe, I think, like I've guessed in a previous book, a previous video, maybe one of them die and then they come back as a returned. And I'm pretty certain people are choosing, someone's choosing who comes back as a returned. I don't think it's an accident. So yes, I think coming back as a returned, becoming the God Queen, is going to happen to one of the 2 girls, either Ciri or Vivenna, and I'm leaning towards Vivenna right now. And Vivenna's story has been really interesting. We have this interaction with the other Idrians, and she's kind of disgusted with them. And then the Hallinger and Lifeless attack, We see her kind of empathize with Claude, and we learn a lot more about the Lifeless. She then decides she hates the Hallandren and that she wants to destroy them. And I have this feeling she's going to learn how to awaken, obviously, especially now that Vasha has taken her and kidnapped her. And we're going to get into that in a moment, because that backstory seems probably the most interesting thing out of everything. I think like she's going to figure out how to bring the Lifeless back. And I had this idea. The Lifeless really seem like the opposite of the Returns. Like the Returns are more colorful, more glorious, larger than life, nothing can affect them kind of thing. And the Lifeless are like the opposite, but the same in some ways. So the Lifeless are all grey and dull and don't think, but they also aren't affected by like hunger and I would guess disease in the same way the Returned aren't also. So they also seem like opposite ends of a spectrum. So maybe there's something there, but I just feel like someone's going to figure out how to put life, actual life, breaths back into the Lifeless potentially. And if anyone's going to do that, it's going to be Vivenna as well. So in all my predictions, Vivenna's coming out as awesome, even though I feel like she's taken a turn for the worse in this last couple of chapters because of her new attitude towards not just Hallandren but just of anger. But this next period of time with her and Vasha, we should get some good reveals. And why do I think we're going to get some good reveals? A couple of reasons. Number one, what was it? So Vasha refers to Denf as Vara Trilices, which is very similar to the name of the priest, I believe, the main priest, the priest of the Godking, which is just Trilides, I'm pretty certain. So that's interesting. It would imply that Denf and that gang of people are much more important. And we already know Denf can move faster than anybody else, and he's dangerous, and he already has a relationship with Vasha. So they have some kind of relationship that's way deeper than what I was expecting originally. And somebody told me, because obviously I read the Mistborn trilogy, somebody told me that, or multiple people, that Drifter pops up in almost every single book if you can look for him. So I have been looking for him in this book, and I have a candidate. I think that the storyteller Hoyd, he is my prime candidate for Drifter so far. Reason being, he has all the white hair, white beard, white everything. He looks younger than he actually is. And what was the last reason? He tells this wonderful story in a ton of detail, as if he was there, like from hundreds of years ago. And obviously we know that Drifter remained young, a young man from the previous books, remained a young man, has this white hair, is very knowledgeable, and he seemed completely at ease with being with the gods, which isn't normal. Like, not the other people don't seem to be at ease, and there was no mention of him being uneasy with speaking to a queen or the Returned. He seemed actually right at home, and I think he's probably trying to manipulate and change the things that are happening, and it's quite important he sets Ciri on this task. So there's my guess for Drifter. The story Drifter gives is quite confusing. He talks about the 5 scholars and them learning new commands for the Lifeless, and there's probably a lot to unpack there, but there was so much that I just kind of accepted the story and enjoyed it. So I don't have a ton of guesses based on that. But what I do think is those scholars are still alive. And I would guess, based on the fact that Vasha has a different name for Denf, and Denf seems to have a different name for Vasha, and Vasha is talking to himself and he says they're ruining the plan, and I think Vasha killed one of the other of their group as well. I mean, my guess would be that these guys are somehow tied to the scholars. If they aren't, I mean, it wouldn't make that much sense that they were all the scholars. Maybe just Vasha and Denf are scholars previously, or maybe they still are scholars. I don't know how it works, but I think that those are ancient characters, because what's mentioned in Hoyd's story is one of the scholars figured out how to make weapons far more powerful than others could, and Vasha has Nightblood, which is clearly the most badass item in the entirety of the story because of the way everybody talks about it. And when you get any kind of scene with it, it just seems like joyously, and it acts like it knows Denf and the other ones as well, which would kind of make sense if they were all like scholars together previously. I don't know. Like, that one seems like maybe a bit of a long shot, but just knowing Brandon Sanderson and reading like a few of his books now, that would kind of make sense. So what did the scholars want? I have absolutely no idea. I mean, initially I thought it was tied into like the God King and all of that, and I think it is, because that's the main storyline. But I'm starting to wonder, is there going to be a shard in this book? There's been, you know, the shards were super important in the previous book. So eventually harmony, but before that ruin and preservation. So I know that the Cosmere is kind of tied together by these shards, and I can't remember the name of the being that was split into like 16, but I feel like that has to pop up somewhere. I'm just not really sure where a shard would come up. I mean, we kind of have vessels. I feel like the more I think about the return seem to just be vessels for something else that comes into them and makes them like the returned. But maybe they're just vessels for this like magical breath. I'm not certain how that all fits in together, or what the game plan is of like Demph and Vasher and where their beef/war is. But he says they're ruining the plan. He obviously knows Vivenna because he recognizes her. I still think the Idrian King is going to be somebody who is a lot more involved than we think. Like, he knows what's going on. He's actually going to be a bit of a puppet master. So what does it all mean? I don't know, but something I do think is going to happen is it's clear, and I guessed this actually pretty early. Blushweaver is the real threat. She is political, she's driven, she's capable, she's gorgeous, according to the book. And she now has control over a lot of the commands of the Lifeless, and it feels a bit like she's about to end up with 3 out of the 4 Lifeless commands, unless Lyxon can do something about it and grab the other ones. But I don't think he really wants to. But we'll see, because at least he has a quarter of them, which is good. So Blushweaver, I think, will discover that the God King... Well, Blushweaver doesn't like Ciri, we know that. She was very aggressive towards her last time. The God King is falling in love with Ciri, so Blushweaver will cross Ciri. Maybe Blushweaver and the God King clash. I don't know how capable the God King actually is, because he can't seem to use his breaths, but if he can figure out how to, that would be cool. Or maybe Blushweaver kills Ciri, and then the God King, that's when the God King gives his breaths to somebody. Maybe gives it to Ciri. But I've been thinking about these tunnels. So the tunnels... Potentially, Ciri has asked Bluefinger to get the God King and her out, if possible. Maybe he suggests the tunnels, maybe they go down there and then they discover the big secret as to what the tunnels are used for. And potentially, I think the tunnels go to Idrian, and I don't know why, but I feel like, just maybe, I'm not sure. I just feel like Idrian's much more involved in this than, especially their king. There seems to be a big secret from the Idrian side, and Lamech's, and all of that, but I haven't quite figured it out. But I have a lot of strands, and this has been a really fun video to put together. What's going to happen next? I don't know. I know that Vasher is going to spill the beans. He's definitely going to explain at least a lot to Vivenna, or maybe not even explain, but reveal a lot to Vivenna. He has a lot to reveal, so I'm just really excited to read on. As I've said in nearly every single one of these videos for this book, this book, I did really enjoy Mistborn trilogy. It was fantastic. I had a great time reading it. This book has been much better than that trilogy. And I think maybe it's just because of the style of the book. As I said before, I love a political intrigue. I think the characters are much more interesting and nuanced here. I think things are less blunt and obvious with regards to the characters and character types. Everyone seems to be a little bit more great, and also Brandon Sanderson seems to be allowing me to just form my own opinion of these people, rather than in Mistborn, like I said, the characters seem to be like, this is a good character, this is this character who's going to be a bumbling idiot and then grow into somebody. This character is going to be someone who's really posh and uppity and noble, and then going to turn into a great leader. And although it had some great characters, I just feel like this one is much more my style. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I know this one has been a lot of just rambling, but I've been really excited. I feel like I have so many clues. I don't know how to put them all together, but I just feel like I'm getting close, and this one, more than any other prediction series, people have said that I've been getting closer and closer and closer to getting some of the predictions right, and obviously some of them wildly wrong as well. So yeah, it's just been really enjoyable. I hope you've enjoyed watching as well. If you have, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.